At 2 a.m. local time, inside the command room of a $500 million Russian oil rig, an operator quietly sips his coffee. He doesn't realize that just 10 feet above the waves, two Ukrainian Katran drones are racing toward him at 80 miles per hour. In less than a minute, his world will erupt. This perfectly coordinated strike began on land, part of a larger campaign that crippled Russia's refineries and sent fuel prices in Crimea soaring. With refineries burning across the region, Ukraine shifted its focus. They were no longer chasing the product, they were striking at the source. Russia's fatal flaw was believing its own propaganda. Moscow considered the rig an unsinkable fortress, bristling with radar dishes and high-powered GPS jammers, while its main fleet hid comfortably in port. They had planned for every possible attack from air or sea, but overlooked one thing: a smarter enemy. The rig wasn't merely pumping oil, it was the electronic nerve center of Russia's southern front. Its jammers blinded Ukraine's precision weapons aimed at Kherson, and its radar tracked the grain ships that fed millions. Destroying it meant far more than a $500 million explosion. It meant blinding an army, protecting global food supplies, and proving that nowhere was truly safe. The mission began hours earlier, at 10:15 p.m., when two Katran drones quietly slipped into the water from a hidden site near Odessa. They didn't take a straight path. Instead, they hugged the coastline, flying just 50 feet above the water and looping wide around Snake Island. That route kept them perfectly below Earth's curvature, invisible to Russia's advanced positive M radar. At the same time, an underwater TLKA drone began its silent journey, releasing fake sonar pings, a phantom signal built to lure Russian sensors astray. But this clever trick posed a challenge. How could operators control drones from 200 miles away when signals were weak and easily jammed? The solution was the ghost boat. Yet it couldn't simply sail that distance, it would be spotted within the first hour. The real plan was far more ingenious: a modern Trojan horse. Days before, an unremarkable cargo ship departed a Romanian port. Hidden inside one of its containers was a robotic relay vessel. Under the cover of darkness, as the ship neared the target zone, a crane quietly lowered the ghost boat into the sea. The cargo ship never stopped. It simply continued toward Turkey, blending into busy commercial traffic. The robotic boat then traveled the final miles alone, acting like a floating Wi-Fi extender for a drone strike. But it was also the mission's single point of failure. If found, everything would collapse. If that tiny relay boat were exposed or traced, the drones would instantly become worthless, blind, and deaf inside enemy waters. The entire mission depended on this one ghost remaining unseen. For hours, the digital specters drifted unnoticed through the night. Everything was perfect until perfection began to break. On a Russian corvette 12 miles away, a sonar operator noticed something odd. The decoy's sound was too clean, like a looped recording without the imperfections of a real submarine. He reported it. Seconds later, a Tor-M2 missile tore through the sky toward the phantom noise. At that exact instant, the second phase began. On the rig's radar screen, a faint flicker appeared, a single blip on the edge of detection. It was the Katran. This was the moment Ukrainian commanders had been waiting for, the signal to trigger their countermove. They knew the Katran wasn't just a boat. It carried a swarm of FPV drones. To force Russia's hand, they made a calculated sacrifice. The hatch of one Katran slid open, releasing a single FPV drone. It rose slowly into the night, a glowing lure begging to be seen. The incoming Tor-M2 missile now had a simple choice: chase the ghost below or destroy the visible target above. The missile instantly shifted course, vaporizing the FPV drone in a flash. The element of total surprise was lost. Now the Russians knew two things. There were drones out there and they were close. Sirens blared across Novorossiysk Air Base as pilots sprinted toward their Su-30 SM fighter jets. The real countdown had begun 18 minutes until two of the world's deadliest interceptors reached the area. At 1:43 a.m., the rig's positive M radar locked on. With the drones exposed, Russian crews were seconds away from launching another missile salvo to erase them from the map. But the Ukrainians hadn't only planned for success, they had planned for detection. The lead Katran fought back using pure physics, unleashing a focused electronic warfare blast that jammed the positive M's X-band radar with digital noise. Instantly, the Russian display turned from a sharp tactical map into a wall of blinding white static. During that 30-second blackout, the rig became effectively blind. Seizing the brief window, the Catran hatches opened and the true assault commenced. 4 FPV drones screamed into the night, each tethered to the Catran by fiber optic cables and relayed through the Ghost Boat Starlink link. While Russian systems scrambled to reboot, the 4 executed a flawless beam maneuver, slicing across the rig perimeter and struck precise components inside. To the recovering radar, their signals faded into sea clutter and became nearly indistinguishable. Their targets were the GPS jamming and communications antennas mounted atop the rig. As this aerial ballet unfolded, the TLK-A underwater drone rose to periscope depth, masking its heat signature beneath 3-foot waves. It launched a single 10-pound mini torpedo, not at the superstructure but at one massive concrete leg below the waterline, creating the first critical structural weakness. That first layer of Russian defense had been dismantled and the rig was blind and wounded. Yet a deadlier issue emerged. Electronic warfare attack acted like a flare, broadcasting a presence over the Black Sea. And the 2 Su-30 SM fighters 14 minutes away did not depend on the rig's radar alone. Their look-down radars were powerful and they raced to join the fight at 1:45 a.m. Blinding the rig was like setting off a flare in a dark forest loudly. To anything with the right sensors, that flare was obvious. 80 miles away, the 2 Su-30 saw it clear as day. From 30,000 feet, the perspective changed. The jets could filter sea clutter and pick 4 distinct heat signatures from tiny FPV motors on their displays instantly. On the lead pilot's display, 4 target boxes snapped into place, and his thumb hovered over the weapon release. Below the surface, the crisis deepened, and the situation became far more complex than just aerial threats and urgent. Down below, the Bayern M corvette, furious at being deceived, stopped chasing sonar ghosts and hunted the source. It raced toward the torpedo impact point, deploying anti-torpedo nets and activating close-range sonar. The Toka found its escape closing fast. This had become the ultimate stake. If the Toka were captured or even one FPV drone recovered, the ghost relay and underwater launch tactics would be revealed. The revolutionary doctrine would be compromised and a priceless strategic advantage lost forever to enemy intelligence analysis. A $1 million chess match that had played perfectly for hours was about to collapse. At 1:47 a.m., the Su-30 had a perfect lock, and the corvette sonar pinged the Toka's exact location. For most militaries, this would be the end completely. But that chaos was precisely the Ukrainian plan. They never intended to slip past the jets unnoticed. They intended to bait them. The Su-30 pilot had no lock on the tiny cold FPV motors. His heat-seeking missiles locked on the only heat signature large enough, the gasoline engine of the Catran mothership. The Catran was designed to be an irresistible target, a sacrificial decoy. Just as the pilot squeezed the trigger, the Catran released a final gambit, a volley of hyper-intense thermal decoys burning far hotter and brighter than any drone engine. The incoming missile, a seeker tuned to heat, had no choice at all. The missile veered violently and slammed into the decoy, detonating harmlessly over open ocean. The Catran vanished into the darkness, its children now free to speed away. Simultaneously, the Toka, trapped and unable to outrun the corvette, fired its final mini torpedo, not at the ship but at the same concrete leg struck earlier, and chaos ensued. That blast aimed to create chaos, not just destruction. A shockwave, concrete dust and bubbles flooded the water and blinded the corvette's sonar like a flashbang. In sensory blackout, the Toka slipped into an acoustic shadow among the rig's underwater structures and vanished and disappeared. The board had been wiped clean. The blast wasn't about destruction, it was about confusion. The explosion sent a violent shockwave, and a cloud of shattered concrete and bubbles racing through the sea, blinding the corvette's sonar like a flashbang in the dark. For a few critical seconds, they were deaf and blind, giving Toka time to slip into the rig's acoustic shadow and vanish. The battlefield was reset. Every layer of Russia's $500 million defense had been outsmarted, outplayed, and neutralized. The heart of the target, the oil rig, now stood fully exposed. At 1:48 a.m., a single order came from Kyiv: execute. The remaining 4 FPV drones didn't just fly. They hunted, programmed to finish the job. They streaked through the darkness at 150 miles per hour, locking their laser sights on targets no larger than a dinner plate. 2 went for the rig's main communications array, while the other 2 targeted the GPS spoofer protecting Russian forces in Kherson. From below, Toka fired its third and last torpedo, not at a new point, but the same weakened concrete leg. The 10-pound warhead slammed into the fractured structure, sending a devastating 10,000 psi shockwave through the rig's already broken frame. The platform didn't just shudder, it roared, the sound of a $500 million colossus being torn apart from within. The FPV drones carried warheads with a 1.1-second fuse delay, the secret that made them deadly. Instead of exploding on impact, they pierced the rig's walls and detonated inside, turning small charges into bunker busters. In open air, the pressure wave would vanish. Inside, it multiplied. Inside the sealed control room, the blast waves ricocheted endlessly, shredding electronics and tearing the command core apart. That was the first punch. The second came from below. The Toka's previous torpedo had already fractured the leg, and the new concussive shock finished the job. The structural failure was catastrophic. The leg didn't just crack, it folded. The platform lurched violently, snapping pipes and cutting power lines. Then came the chain reaction. More than 4,000 gallons of crude oil spilled from ruptured pipes and ignited by a stray spark from broken cables. It was no longer a simple collapse, it became a self-feeding inferno. Flames reached 2,000 degrees, turning the rig into a $500 million pyre of Russian pride. But the physical destruction was only the beginning. The 25 operators and guards aboard were eliminated instantly, their command chain vaporized. The Bayan M corvette, deafened by the blast and blinded by the flames, circled helplessly around the disaster zone. Within an hour, Spetsnaz fast boats arrived from Crimea, not for rescue but to quarantine the site, desperate to contain the truth of what had happened. Their efforts were meaningless. 14 minutes after the final blast, a commercial satellite passed overhead, its thermal sensors piercing the smoke and capturing the glowing scar where the $500 million rig once stood. The hole was 20 feet wide, but the hole in Russia's naval strategy was far greater. The first domino to fall was at Kherson. Without the rig's constant GPS spoofing, Russia's smart artillery became blind steel. Accuracy collapsed. For the first time in months, Ukrainian units could maneuver freely without a digital phantom haunting every step. The second domino struck global shipping lanes. Oil tankers and cargo ships, seeing the images, began avoiding the western Black Sea like a plague zone. Insurance rates exploded, and Russia's strained supply routes grew even longer and costlier, an accidental blockade of its own making. The third and most damaging domino fell in the Kremlin itself. The strike didn't just destroy a rig, it shattered the illusion of Russian control in the Black Sea. Paranoia spread through the ranks. The Black Sea Fleet, already hiding like ghosts in Novorossiysk, retreated further. What was once a symbol of power had become a fleet merely existing to survive. Which part was more brilliant, the Trojan cargo ship or the sacrificial Katran? If you admire this kind of battlefield brilliance, hit like and subscribe. The drone war in the Black Sea has only just begun.